Let's start by explaining what the term tall and tight means. And let me thank the bros over at Strength Faction for the term. When you're tall and tight, your core is in its most stable position. Your ribs are stacked directly over your hips, like a Russian nesting doll, where the top and bottom are joined by a parallel seam in the middle. You can test this on yourself by putting your thumb at the bottom of your ribs and your pinky on the tip of your hip bone. Are they stacked so your thumb is directly over your pinky? Now pull your ribs up to the ceiling like you're a macho man. Do you see how that makes your back arch a bit? Your ribs are now in front of your hips. Though sometimes people think this is good posture, it's not a very stable position for your Russian nesting doll. Now do the opposite. Let your ribs sink behind your hips. Notice your hips tuck under and jut forward a bit. You're in the universal position of sadness, hereby called Eeyore posture. Also not nesting doll friendly. Imagine loading several hundred pounds onto either of these positions. With your ribs in front, you'd tip forward, and with your ribs behind, you'd fall back. So it's important to learn how to stack ribs over hips for the most stable structural position. When you're tall and tight and you're bracing your abs, try to brace by pulling your ribs together, the front ribs toward your back ribs, the back ribs toward your front ribs, and the side ribs in towards the center. You should feel like your abs are rock solid. I call these Houdini abs. If you get punched in the stomach and you're braced, it won't kill you. Go ahead. Google Harry Houdini death. I'll wait. If you're getting into a high plank position, before you lift your knees off the ground, check out your rib-hip alignment. Then, holding that alignment, bring your knees off the ground. You should feel stable, like you're tall and tight in your plank. Try this with your back arched, macho man posture, or your hips tucked and dropped down, Eeyore posture. Most likely that doesn't feel very stable, and it might even feel uncomfortable. Do you ever feel low back pain when you're planking? That's probably because your ribs and hips aren't starting or staying aligned. This alignment carries over into plank exercises like the push-up, and even standing exercises like a hip hinge or bent over row. To create tension in your core and to reinforce this tall and tight posture, we'll start a lot of your warm-ups with some form of diaphragmatic breathing. To practice diaphragmatic breathing, simply lie down on your back with your knees bent and your feet flat on the floor. Find your neutral spine, your tall and tight position. For me, the easiest way to find neutral is to put your palms on the tips of your hip bones and your fingertips on your pubic bone. Rock your pelvis around until your hips and pubic bone feel even. Hip bones above the pubic bone is a macho man posture, and hip bones below the pubic bone is an Eeyore posture. When everything feels even and you're in your tall and tight position, you should have a little space between your low back and the ground. Once you've found your neutral position, put one hand on your chest and the other hand on your belly. Try to breathe in through your nose, past the hand on your chest, and into the hand on your belly. Breathe out with some force, crushing your rib cage together 360 degrees, like you're going to blow the roof off the building. After you've exhaled fully, hold for a second or two, then breathe in and out again, slowly and with control. When all of your breath is exhaled, you might feel very compact, like a crushed can, or you might feel really stiff, like a bundle of sticks, or you might feel something else that means compression and tension to you. Whatever imagery works for you, you should feel like you'd be very hard to move or bend. Singers, musicians, actors, and yoga practitioners might have no problem with this. The rest of us might struggle for way longer than seems right. It's just breathing. Why is it so hard? Just start where you are and try not to get frustrated if you don't feel this compression right away. A lot of people breathe only into their chests, so much that they find that their shoulders raise up toward their ears at each inhale. These people often have shoulder and neck pain. Relearning to breathe can be a challenge, but it might take care of a lot of that tension. Okay, moving on. A slightly more challenging position, but one that more closely aligns with standing, is to have your legs straight. It might be harder to find a neutral spine here. Your low back is likely to arch, especially if you have tight hip flexors, and so it can be harder to get compression into your abs. It might help to imagine that you're closing the space between your ribs and your hips, or that you're pulling your belt buckle up toward your belly button. Turning over and lying on your stomach can make it easier to feel the 360-degree expansion of your abdomen as you breathe in. You can feel your stomach pushing into the ground and your back expanding. Place your hands on your ribs to see if your ribs are pushing out towards the walls. Hint, they should be. If your hip flexors are so tight that you have trouble finding neutral spine, even with your knees bent and feet flat on the floor, try 90-90 breathing. Place your feet on a bench or a wall with your hips and knees bent at 90 degrees. Find your neutral spine. It's easy to slip into Eeyore posture here. Practice the breathing as we've discussed before. You can practice breathing in a multitude of other postures. You can practice on your hands and knees or in a plank position. You can practice seated, which is great for car trips or pretending to work at your desk, and can be especially helpful if you're pregnant and in your second or third trimester. You can practice while standing, which will help translate into the posture you want while you're working out. And here, when you're standing, you can put your hands around your rib cage to feel that 360-degree expansion and compression. So try all of these movements, see what works for you, and let me know.